Translate this, and my salary is yours," Caldwell announced with a smug grin, holding up a thick document like it was a game. The room broke into a wave of laughter, sharp, indulgent, elitist. The marble floor of the Caldwell estate's formal dining room practically hummed with arrogance. Maya Carter stood by the wet bar, wiping down a crystal decanter. She paused, not because she was shocked she was used to being underestimated, but because she recognized the tone in Ethan's voice. It wasn't a joke. It was a dare, a performance. She turned slowly, wiping her hands on the side of her apron. "If I translate it before sunrise," she said, her voice even but edged with defiance, "will you give me a raise?" The laughter paused just for a beat. Ethan blinked. It wasn't the response he expected. Then he smirked. "A raise? Maya, if you manage to translate that correctly, I'll double your salary," he said, chuckling as he tossed the heavy bundle onto the table with a dramatic flair. "It's a binding contract from Lisbon, Portuguese, full of legal and engineering terms. Trust me, Google won't help you." Maya stepped forward, her chin held high. "We'll see." Diane Winters, the CFO, arched an eyebrow and sipped her wine. "Careful, Ethan, you might actually lose this one." She's bluffing," Ethan said, still laughing, though a hint of caution crept into his tone. "It's worth millions. It took our legal team 2 weeks to review. No offense, Maya, but you clean baseboards. This isn't a vacuum manual." The board members chuckled again, more uncomfortably this time. Maya met Ethan's eyes and didn't look away. "No offense taken," she said, "but you'd be surprised what people like me read when no one's watching." The tension shifted subtle, like a draft entering a sealed room. Ethan lifted his bourbon glass, gave a mock toast, and said, "To Maya, may ambition never meet reality." She took the document and walked out without another word. Behind her, the room fell into hushed murmurs. One of the younger execs leaned over and whispered, "She's got guts." "She's got no shot," Ethan said under his breath, but the edge in his voice betrayed something else, something Maya had already seen: uncertainty. Back in the servants' hallway, Maya laid the document down on the worn formica counter of the staff kitchen. She ran her fingers over the embossed seal. It was, as he said, in Portuguese. Thick legal phrasing, technical specs, data rights, clause references. She didn't flinch. Instead, she reached into her purse and pulled out a small, dog-eared Portuguese-English dictionary. Then she took out her old laptop, plugged it in, and opened a folder labeled Universidade de Coimbra, Linguística Avançada. Because what Ethan didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that before she cleaned his floors, Maya had spent 10 years as a language researcher in Brazil and Portugal. Life had knocked her off course, but it hadn't erased what she knew. She dialed a number. "Luis, it's me. I need your eyes on a contract. Tonight." By midnight, Maya had broken down the first section. By 2 a.m., she was cross-referencing clauses and underlining inconsistencies. There was a troubling subsection about international data access. By 4 a.m., she'd annotated every risk buried in the fine print. Outside, Atlanta's sky began to shift dark blue, giving way to hints of dawn. Maya leaned back in her chair. Her fingers were ink-stained. Her coffee had gone cold, but she was ready. She wasn't the maid tonight. She was the only one who truly understood what that contract meant. And soon, they would too. If you felt something from Maya's story, hit like to show your support. And drop a comment with where you're watching from. You might be surprised who's nearby sharing this moment with you. The early light of dawn crept through Maya's thin curtains, casting long shadows across her cluttered living room. She hadn't slept. Her fingers were stiff from typing, translating, and cross-referencing. The air was heavy with the scent of stale coffee, but Maya didn't notice. Her eyes were locked on the final paragraph of her annotated translation. The document wasn't just dangerous, it was deceptive. Buried deep in the legalese was a clause granting full access to Caldwell Technologies' encryption algorithms, proprietary data, trade secrets, and network infrastructure to an overseas shell company. On the surface, it looked like a standard partnership, but underneath, it was a slow bleed, dressed in legitimate language. She saved the file, printed a copy, and neatly paper-clipped the pages together. Her eyes drifted to the photograph on her bookshelf. It was old and slightly faded. Maya in a graduation robe, flanked by two professors from the University of Lisbon. Her hair was shorter then, her smile wider. In her hands was a thesis on polyglot cognitive structure and the evolution of legal semantics in Romance languages. That was another life, another Maya. Back then, she'd been Dr. Maya Carter, the keynote speaker at international conferences, the rising star in multilingual forensics. She had published papers, mentored doctoral students, worked on government translation commissions. And then came 2008. A scandal in her department she wasn't part of but took the fall for. Budget cuts, a visa complication, her tenure offer rescinded. 2 years later, her savings drained, her green card in limbo. Maya took a housekeeping job in Atlanta to keep her head above water. Caldwell estate was supposed to be temporary. 15 years later, she was still dusting the awards of men she once could have out-argued in 3 languages. She folded the printed translation and slipped it into a manila envelope. Across town, the Caldwell estate was slowly waking up. Staff bustled through corridors, fluffing pillows and arranging breakfast trays. Maya arrived through the back entrance, wearing her uniform, holding her envelope close to her chest like a shield. The security guard nodded at her without interest. In the kitchen, she poured a cup of coffee and waited. "Morning, Maya." Olivia, one of the younger housekeepers, said, yawning. "You look intense." "I just didn't sleep much," Maya replied with a faint smile. "You know, mister, Caldwell's got that early board meeting, right? All the suits are already up in the main dining room." Maya nodded. "Perfect." Upstairs, Ethan Caldwell stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his cufflinks. His eyes were bloodshot, his breath still tinged with last night's whiskey. He hadn't slept well either, though he'd never admit it. Part of him wondered if Maya would even show up again. He hoped she wouldn't. That would make it easier to laugh off the whole thing. When he entered the dining room, the board was already gathered. Diane Winters was reviewing documents. 2 junior VPs argued over an earnings report, and then Maya appeared at the double doors, calm, composed, carrying the envelope. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You're really going through with this?" Maya walked in and set the envelope on the table in front of him. "I said I'd do my best," she replied. "I did." He opened the envelope casually, not expecting much. Then he paused. The paper was covered in tight, clean handwriting. Annotations, references, cross-sections of legal clauses, with corresponding notes in English and Portuguese. It wasn't Google Translate gibberish. It was surgical, professional, devastating. Diane leaned over and skimmed a few pages, her brows furrowed. Where did she get this phrasing? These terms are accurate, spot on. Ethan's smirk faded slightly. Maya took a breath. The clause under Section 14.3. It allows full encryption key transfer upon the second renewal of partnership, without notification. That includes Caldwell's proprietary database structures and IP routing systems. In layman's terms, you're giving away your architecture. Silence fell over the room. One of the board members, a former attorney, flipped through the pages with rising alarm. "She's right. I didn't catch this. None of us did." Ethan turned slowly, eyes narrowing. "Where did you learn this? Who helped you?" "No one you know," Maya replied evenly. "I had help reviewing some legal language, but the translation, that's mine." Diane looked at Maya with a new measure of respect. "You're not just a maid." "I'm someone who's been invisible for a long time," Maya said, "but that doesn't mean I stopped knowing things." Ethan tapped the envelope. "This could have cost me everything." "It still might," Diane warned. "This contract needs to be scrapped immediately. If it had been signed." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, then looked at Maya like he was seeing her for the first time. "You were serious last night." Maya nodded. "I always am." "You could have kept quiet," Ethan said, just handed it back and smiled. "I could have," she agreed. "But then what would that make me?" A tense pause followed. Ethan picked up the document, weighed it in his hand, and then chuckled under his breath. "Fine. I owe you a raise." Maya didn't smile. "No. You owe me respect." She turned and walked away, leaving the room silent behind her. As she exited the dining room, Olivia met her in the hallway. "What just happened in there?" "I reminded them I exist," Maya replied. In her locker, tucked behind a spare apron, She hid the original printout of the contract with her notes, every line she'd translated, every clause she'd flagged. It wasn't about proof. It was about keeping a record. People like her had their knowledge erased too often. By the time Ethan finished his meeting, the board was in chaos. Lawyers were called. The deal was postponed. Press releases were quietly drafted in case of leaks. And Ethan, for the first time in his career, felt something new toward one of his employees: unease. Later that afternoon, he summoned Diane. "Find out everything you can about her," he said, discreetly. Diane nodded. "Already on it." In her apartment that night, Maya lit a single candle, brewed a pot of peppermint tea, and opened an old file labeled Academic Credentials. One day, she might need them again. But for now, she'd reminded the world that silence doesn't mean ignorance. And visibility isn't always power. Sometimes, it's the quiet ones you should fear the most. The day after the board meeting passed in a flurry of damage control, Caldwell Technologies went into silent lockdown, and the contract Maya had translated was quietly buried under a mound of internal reassessment documents. The company's legal team issued a soft cease and desist to the Lisbon partner, citing vague, contractual inconsistencies, and board members whispered nervously in private threads. None of them said her name aloud, but they all thought of her. Maya, the maid who translated a multi-million-dollar international agreement in one night. But Maya didn't bask in the ripple she caused. That night, she returned to her apartment and collapsed onto her couch. Her legs ached. Her back was tight. Her eyes stung from exhaustion, but sleep refused her. She stared at the ceiling fan as it spun slowly, listening to the hum of a distant train roll through East Atlanta. Memories, long locked away, began to rise slow and sharp like splinters from old wood. She was 29 the first time someone told her she was too educated to be helpful. It was at a conference in Porto, after she presented a paper on multilingual semantic conflicts in legal arbitration. A white American professor had laughed and said, "That's a cute theory, but don't expect it to translate into policy." Everyone else had chuckled politely. Maya didn't laugh. She just remembered. She had learned early. Brilliance was only acceptable when it was convenient for others, when it stayed quiet, tidy, grateful. And then came the unraveling: her university in Brazil, caught in a corruption scandal. The immigration issues that followed. Her name, dragged into it by association, lost credibility. Colleagues distanced themselves. The grants dried up. No one fought for her. By the time she stood before a judge in Atlanta in 2010, appealing her work visa with a file of publications and letters of recommendation, she already knew how it would end. Overqualified, underprocessed, the clerk had muttered. So she became invisible. She cleaned homes. She cooked, folded, scrubbed. She wore a different uniform, but her mind stayed sharp. Every Saturday night, she studied in secret. Legal Portuguese, patent filings, international trade law. She read medical glossaries and security manuals in Spanish and Chinese. She watched online lectures from MIT, bookmarked articles in 3 languages. She told no one, because she knew one day they'd need her. Now, she was no longer just the help, and that terrified them. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. "Luis, they're going to dig into your background." Maya didn't reply immediately. She expected as much. People like Ethan didn't like to be surprised. "Luis, are you ready for that?" She typed, "Let them. I didn't lie. I just didn't perform." Luis sent a thumbs-up emoji, followed by, "Proud of you, Professora." She smiled for the first time that day. The next morning at Caldwell Estate, the mood had shifted. Not one of apology or shame, but of surveillance. The staff whispered more quietly. Olivia warned her as she handed Maya a folded towel. "You're trending in the house Slack." Maya raised an eyebrow. "I didn't know we rated Slack channels." "Oh, we don't. They just made one after last night." Diane's assistant posted a message about employee vetting and reputational risk. Maya folded the towel slowly. Reputational risk, of course. Later, while delivering a tray of espresso to Ethan's private office, she found him staring out the window. He didn't turn around as she entered. "Leave it on the side table," he said. She did. Then, after a breath, I hear I've become a risk. He glanced at her. You've become complicated. No more complicated than your contract, she replied. A pause. Then he spoke more softly. How did I not know who you are? Because you never asked, she said, folding her hands calmly in front of her. You never looked. Ethan sighed and turned to face her. For the first time, there was no condescension in his gaze, just calculation, the look of a man who had misjudged the chessboard. I underestimated you, he admitted. That's not a mistake I often make. It's one people like you make more than you realize, she answered. And one that costs more than a translation fee. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I want to offer you something. She raised an eyebrow. Not charity, he clarified. An opportunity. I want you to review international contracts going forward. Quietly, of course. As a consultant, I can pay you significantly more than your current position. And what would I be called? She asked, tone mild but steely. A contractor. Language and compliance. No title? Not officially. She tilted her head. Because acknowledging me would be inconvenient. Because right now, he said carefully, too many people think of you as the maid. And you're afraid of the backlash if they realize your maid is smarter than your lawyers. Silence. Then he said, that's not fair. Maya didn't respond. Finally, he added, but it's not untrue. She turned toward the door. I'll consider your offer, she said, but only if it includes respect. He nodded once. You'll have it. She paused at the threshold. One more thing. If I find anything unethical in your future contracts, I walk. No matter the pay. He nodded again. Understood. That night, Maya returned home and retrieved a locked box from under her bed. Inside were the remnants of her former life. Degrees, letters, the medal from her university's faculty award, and a dusty USB drive. She plugged it in. On it were dozens of old research papers, translation algorithms, teaching notes. She skimmed one labeled AI and Semantic Integrity in Contractual Language. Then she opened a blank document. Title: Hidden Workers, Silent Wisdom, an Autobiography in Translation. She typed the first sentence. For years, they thought I was quiet because I had nothing to say. But I was silent because I knew everything I said could be used against me. Outside, the Georgia sky stretched dark and wide. Inside, Maya wrote, and this time, her words were going to be seen. At precisely 7 o'clock a.m., Maya arrived at the Caldwell estate. The sun had barely risen, but the mansion was already buzzing. Caterers moved discreetly through the kitchen preparing for a mid-morning executive brunch. A delivery truck idled at the back gate. Someone had double-parked a black SUV. In the drive, likely, a member of the board. Maya slipped in through the rear entrance, carrying nothing but her usual tote and a thermos of strong black tea. She was dressed in her standard uniform, a navy blue skirt and white blouse, hair pulled neatly back. From the outside, nothing had changed. But inside, everything had shifted. The house didn't look at her the same way anymore. As she walked past the main hallway, the junior assistant to the COO, an anxious 20-something named Trevor, peeked out from a conference room and immediately stepped aside. His nod was stiff, his eyes uncertain, like a man passing a ghost he wasn't sure he believed in. In the dining room, Ethan Caldwell sat at the head of the polished oak table. He wasn't in a suit yet, just a fitted white dress shirt, sleeves rolled, nursing a cup of espresso. His eyes were bloodshot again, but this time with restlessness, not indulgence. He looked up as Maya entered, then motioned to the empty seat beside him. She hesitated. Please, he said, voice lower than usual. Sit. She placed her thermos on a side table and took the seat, back straight, eyes level. Ethan studied her for a moment. You're not surprised, I asked. I knew you would. The question is whether you'll listen. I intend to, he said, but first I want to thank you. She gave him a look that bordered on skeptical. I mean it, he said. What you did. You saved the company. No, Maya replied softly. I saved you from yourself. He sat back, silent for a long moment. I've been reviewing your background, he said. Your academic record, your publications, your credentials. Honestly, it's impressive. Maya said nothing. And infuriating, he added, because I didn't see it. You were under my nose for 15 years. You didn't look, she said again. You never asked. I know. And I won't pretend that was anything but arrogance. She folded her hands on the table. So what now? Ethan took a breath. The board is split. Half want to bring you on formally, give you a title, a contract, everything. The other half is afraid of what that signals. What does it signal? That I didn't know who was working in my own house. That someone in a subservient position outmaneuvered our legal department. That our systems are more fragile than we thought. Maya's mouth curled slightly. Sounds like the truth scares them. He nodded. It does. Then they don't deserve my expertise. They might not, Ethan said. But the company does. The staff does. The people whose jobs depend on this company staying afloat, they need someone who actually understands what's at stake. She looked at him long and hard. And what do you need, Ethan? He hesitated. I need you to help us rebuild trust. Quietly, at first. Then maybe publicly. Maya leaned forward slightly. You want me to fix what your ego broke? Yes. There was no defensiveness in his tone. Just tired honesty. Maya nodded slowly. Then I have conditions. He raised an eyebrow. Let's hear them. 1. I work on my terms. Hours I set. From home or wherever I choose. 2. You will not parade me around as your diversity trophy. 3. Every contract I review will be subject to my full discretion. If I find something unethical, I will flag it, and I expect action. Ethan nodded. Done. 4, she continued. I want you to create a scholarship fund for domestic workers seeking education. In my name, quietly. That gave him pause. She met his hesitation with cold certainty. That's non-negotiable. After a moment, he nodded again. You drive a hard bargain. I've had to. A pause hung between them. Then he added, almost sheepishly, would you be willing to come to the boardroom in 20 minutes? I'd like you to explain your findings clearly. I'll explain, she said, but I'm not justifying myself. I'm not apologizing for being right. Understood. As Maya stood to leave, Ethan said, You still planning on writing that book? She turned, surprised. How do you know about that? You left the title on your open laptop yesterday. I was having the IT team install new VPN protocols routine. One of them noticed it. Maya tilted her head. And? He gave a small smile. I'd read it. She didn't smile back. I'm not writing it for you. As she left the dining room, Diane Winters caught up with her in the hallway. Quite the morning, Diane said. Just another day, Maya replied. Diane gave her a long look. For what it's worth, I voted yes. To bring me on. To respect you. Maya nodded, accepting the gesture. That's a good start. 20 minutes later, she entered the boardroom. The walls were glass. The table long and gleaming. 12 executives sat with open laptops, steaming coffee cups, and guarded expressions. Ethan introduced her not as housekeeper or consultant, but simply Maya Carter, expert in legal linguistics and international compliance. She laid her annotated version of the Lisbon contract on the table. Clause 14.3, she began, calm and composed. That's your landmine. That clause would have handed over your encryption to a third-party front company. That alone would have violated federal security protocols. But deeper still, look at 19.7, the jurisdiction shift. You'd be stuck litigating future disputes in Lisbon, under their trade arbitration panel. You'd lose control of every decision. Murmurs moved down the table. One of the men tried to interrupt. Excuse me, but, Maya held up a hand. If you had caught this, I wouldn't be here. Let me finish. Silence followed. She outlined each danger in the contract, methodically, without ego, just truth. When she was done, Ethan looked around the table. Any questions? No one spoke. Diane finally said, Let's move to cancel the deal immediately. And issue an internal memo, clarifying our vetting procedures. Maya stepped back from the table. She wasn't part of the board. Not yet. But they all looked at her with something new in their eyes, not fear, not pity, recognition. She had a voice, and it carried weight. That afternoon, Maya returned home. She changed out of her uniform for the last time and placed it in a donation bag. She sat at her desk, opened her manuscript, and added a new chapter. Chapter 4. The Morning They Listened. Outside, kids laughed in the parking lot of her apartment complex. Somewhere in the distance, someone played old jazz on a car stereo. And for the first time in years, Maya allowed herself to feel it. Peace. The boardroom was silent, the kind of silence that hangs in the air like smoke-heavy, charged, uncertain. The Lisbon contract lay open on the mahogany table, its pages marked with precise red notes in Maya's handwriting. The board members, seasoned and steely-eyed, sat with arms crossed or pens idle, their expressions betraying confusion, calculation, and a trace of something unexpected, awe. Maya stood at the head of the table, not where the maid usually stood, not near the catering trays or doorways. She was where the decision-makers stood. She didn't wear a suit, didn't bring a PowerPoint presentation, didn't need a clicker or digital charts. All she had were her words, her knowledge, and the truth carefully lined on annotated pages and buried beneath calm resolve. Ethan Caldwell leaned back in his chair, watching her, arms folded across his chest, not with the condescension of days past, but with a cautious respect. He hadn't said a word since she began, and that alone told Maya everything she needed to know. She turned a page. "This clause," she said, pointing to Section 8.4, appears harmless data redundancy protocols to ensure uninterrupted service, but the language is deliberately vague. In Portuguese legal contracts, the term redundância de dados can be used to justify shadow data servers offshore and often beyond audit jurisdiction. This clause would have given your partner access to build redundant storage outside of U.S. oversight. The CFO, Diane Winters, scribbled something on a legal pad, her brows furrowed. "How did we miss that?" "It's written in plausible compliance language," Maya answered, "but the intent is masked behind idiomatic phrasing. This isn't poor translation, it's intentional obfuscation." Trevor, the junior legal analyst, shifted uncomfortably. "We had 2 different consultants review it. Both signed off." Maya looked at him, not unkindly. Were either of them fluent in Portuguese legal terminology? Not conversational Portuguese legal. Arbitration dialect. Trade-specific context? He opened his mouth, then closed it. "I didn't think so," Maya said softly. A few of the executives exchanged glances. There it was again, that moment where hierarchy collided with competence, where titles crumbled before truth. Diane set her pen down. "We need to reassess our entire vetting pipeline. This isn't a translation issue, it's a strategic vulnerability." Maya nodded. "And it won't be the last." She stepped back from the table, giving them space to process what she had just delivered. Ethan spoke then, his voice measured. "Maya, I want to formally request that you take over all international contract review going forward." There were murmurs of approval around the table, quiet, reluctant, but genuine. Maya didn't respond right away. She looked around the room at the faces that once barely registered her presence when she served them hors d'oeuvre, now hanging on her every word. She thought of the years she spent walking through this mansion, invisible and underestimated. And now, they listened. But she also remembered the warning signs. "I'll accept," she said finally, "under one condition." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Just one?" "I already gave you the others," she replied. "This one is new. Every member of this board must undergo a cultural competency audit and a language vulnerability workshop. You want to operate globally. Start thinking globally." Diane laughed lightly, the sound half surprised. "You're serious?" "Maya met hargaze. Always." Trevor raised a hand timidly. Would you teach it?" Maya didn't smile, but something behind her eyes softened. But I'll write the curriculum." Ethan nodded. "Done." The board meeting concluded not with a bang, but with a quiet respect. The kind earned, not granted. The kind people like Maya fought lifetimes to receive. As they exited, several executives paused to thank her. Others walked out quickly, too proud or stunned to speak, but none ignored her. That evening, Maya found herself alone in the study room she had dusted 1,000 times, now offered to her for private use. It was quiet, lined with first-edition books, leather-bound volumes, and artifacts from Ethan's travels. But on the center table sat a single object that didn't belong there before. A brass nameplate. Dr. Maya Carter, Global Compliance Consultant. She stared at it for a long moment, then picked it up and ran her fingers along the engraving. There was a knock at the door. Ethan entered, holding 2 cups of tea. "Olivia told me you preferred peppermint." Maya accepted the cup but said nothing. "I meant it," he said after a pause. "You'll have whatever title you want, whatever space you need." "I want more than space," she replied. "I want silence to stop being currency." He nodded, understanding. "I was wrong." "I know." They drank in silence for a moment. "You could be anywhere," he said. "Working for the government, teaching at Columbia. Why stay here?" Maya looked around the room. "Because here is where it started. And if you want to change the system, you don't run from it. You stand in its center and make it see you." He didn't argue. As he left, Maya sat at the desk, opened her laptop, and resumed writing. Chapter 5. The Power of Precision. She described the room, the faces, the hesitant respect. She wrote not with vengeance, but with clarity. Her story was no longer a whisper. It was a blueprint for others who had been overlooked, unheard, underestimated. Later that night, she received a message from Luis. "Luis, I saw the news. You're being talked about in the industry circles." Maya, good or bad? Luis, the best, kind, quiet, and powerful. She smiled and typed, "Quiet isn't weak. Sometimes it's the sharpest edge in the room." And for the first time in years, she closed her laptop not out of exhaustion, but satisfaction. She had stepped into the storm and the storm had listened. It was nearly 2 weeks after the Lisbon contract incident, and the buzz had barely settled. While the boardroom at Caldwell Technologies resumed its outwardly professional rhythm weekly reports, financial forecasts, procurement reviews, something deeper had shifted, like the tectonic plates of an old house finally cracking under years of unseen pressure. Maya Carter moved through this new space not as a ghost, not as an afterthought, but as an undeniable force. She no longer entered through the servant's door. She had a badge now, an email address ending in at caldwelltech.com. And a private office carved out of what used to be the estate's second-floor library. Her name was on the staff roster. She was listed in meetings. People nodded when she passed, not out of obligation, but awareness. Still, not all nods were equal. She felt the cold glances, the stiff smiles, especially from middle management, those whose own expertise had been quietly overshadowed. A few execs had begun whispering token consultant in break rooms when they thought no one was listening. Some called her the translator, like it was a slight, but Maya didn't react. She never had. She let the work speak louder. She was reviewing a contract proposal from a biotech firm in Sao Paulo when Diane Winters knocked and entered without waiting. "We have a situation," she said. Her tone was brisk, but there was tension behind it. Maya looked up. "What kind of situation?" Diane handed over a thick folder. "It's an old partnership renewal with a Chinese manufacturing firm. It came in 5 days ago. Our international team fast-tracked it. It's already been signed. Without my review, they claimed it didn't need translation. It was presented in English." Maya frowned. "Let me guess, machine translated." Diane nodded grimly. Maya flipped through the contract, scanning key clauses. Halfway through, she paused. Her eyes narrowed. "This clause," she muttered, tapping a paragraph under intellectual property protection. "It contradicts our entire patent framework. It assigns shared patent ownership for newly co-developed Material 7 if they're developed in-house." Diane blanched. "That could expose everything." Maya didn't look up. "Not could. It already has." Within the hour, Ethan had gathered the legal team, R&D, and the CTO into the conference room. Maya stood at the front once again, the contract spread across the digital screen. "This isn't a translation issue," she said firmly. "It's a comprehension issue. Whoever approved this didn't understand the nuance behind legal phrasing translated from Mandarin into direct English. The original Chinese phrase suggests cooperative innovation, but in their legal lexicon, it's tied to property rights. We signed away the exclusive rights to our own formula." One of the lawyers, Tom Hensley, with 30 years under his belt, shifted uncomfortably. "In fairness, it was expedited. We thought it was standard." Maya turned toward him, calm but piercing. "You thought wrong." Ethan didn't interrupt. He let her lead, and everyone noticed. "Luckily," she continued, "there's a loophole. The contract references a procedural clause in a secondary annex document, which was, ironically, still in Chinese. And that clause includes a 72-hour withdrawal option for any party who identifies material misinterpretation. Diane perked up. Do we still have time? Maya nodded. Barely. We need to send the withdrawal notice tonight. Ethan looked at her, a subtle disbelief in his eyes, not because she had caught it, but because she had, once again, pulled them from the brink. Do it, he said. Draft it yourself, and CC every single department head. She nodded and exited the room. That evening, Maya returned to her apartment feeling the familiar weight of exhaustion, but this time, it came with purpose. She shed her coat, heated up leftover stew, and opened her laptop. The draft was already forming in her head, but before she could write, her phone buzzed. Luis, you're on fire, she replied, barely keeping up. Luis, I saw the internal notice. You just saved them again. You ever think about starting your own firm? Maya paused. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Starting her own firm. She had never let the thought land before, not seriously. For years, survival was the priority. Stability. Quiet. But now, maybe it was time for something louder. She typed, I'm thinking about it. Luis responded with a gif of a rocket launching. She laughed. And for the first time, she didn't dismiss the idea. That weekend, Maya took the train to Midtown to meet with a former colleague, Dr. Clara Levine, a retired professor and longtime advocate for immigrant academic professionals. They sat at a cafe beneath a large elm tree. Clara was in her 70s now, with silver hair pulled back into a bun and eyes still sharp behind her glasses. You look different, Clara said, lighter. I'm not, Maya replied, but I'm visible. Clara smiled. Same thing. Maya sipped her tea. I need advice. Starting something? Maybe. A consultancy. A place for people like us, people with credentials, knowledge, but no access. Clara leaned forward. Then start. And don't wait for permission. Maya nodded. She left the cafe with a mind swirling with ideas. That night, she opened a new folder on her laptop, Verity Language and Risk Advisory. Underneath, she wrote the tagline, because clarity is power. She listed names: Luis, Clara, two others she'd met through academic support circles, people fluent in languages, law, medicine, policy, people no one had hired. Yet, as she built out the framework, an email popped in. Subject: Request for clarification. Contract clause 7.2. It was from the head of procurement, CCing Maya directly. She smiled. The quiet ones were being heard. She leaned back in her chair, the sounds of the city humming outside. Her old world academia, knowledge, language, had never left her. It had simply waited, and now, she was no longer translating other people's words. She was writing her own. By the time the weekend ended, Caldwell Technologies was in full corrective mode. Policies were rewritten, partnerships paused, and internal audits announced. Maya Carter, once the housemaid who held no voice, was now at the center of it all, quietly guiding the changes she had forced into motion. But what came next wasn't just procedural, it was personal. Monday morning, Maya arrived at the estate and walked to her office in the old library. She passed security again, badge clipped to her blouse now. Staff nodded more openly. A soft hum of acknowledgement followed her path. But when she reached her door, she found it cracked open. Inside, Ethan and Diane waited. Neither spoke as she entered. Ethan finally asked, "You have a moment?" She closed the door behind her. "Of course." He motioned for her to sit. Diane remained standing. This felt significant. Yesterday, during an executive lunch, someone asked what they should call you. Ethan began, voice measured. They got nervous. Titles matter. Maya nodded slowly. They're offering you a formal Rolia director-level position complete with office space off-site if you prefer, budget, team, compensation, well above what we discussed. She waited. Diane shifted. Ethan continued. But there's pushback. Some argue you'll disrupt the chain of command. Others think you'll overshadow legal. Maya exhaled quietly. Titles don't matter. Respect does. If you want me to help protect this company, she paused, then don't make me an outsider. Ethan leaned forward. I want you integrated. Full participation. She looked at Diane, who met her gaze with sincerity. You can do this? Maya asked Diane. I can, Diane replied, but we'll need your help to manage it. Maya nodded. Then let's define my scope now, and make it clear. No more hidden roles. Ethan exhaled with relief. Thank you. As they left the office, Diane grabbed Maya's arm. We need to prepare. There's a board session on Thursday. You'll present the new compliance workflow. Maya nodded. And we'll need to address the external partners Lisbon, São Paulo, Shanghai. Diane stopped, looked into her eyes, and said, They'll listen. Over the next 2 days, Maya worked late into the night. She drafted a fully integrated contract review framework, multilingual protocols, cultural training, layered translation verification, escalation paths. She built slide decks for training sessions and even drafted outreach letters to overseas partners explaining the new standard with apologies and assurances. It was delicate diplomacy layered with enforcement. One evening, as she burned the midnight oil, her phone buzzed. A message from Luis. Your piece in the Journal of Legal Language sold out its initial run. Maya tapped a quick reply, thank you. Then she pulled up the draft of her chapter on Language as Invisible Power, the one she'd written in Cafe Sunlight. She reread the final paragraph. Our silence is not lack of voice, it is withheld potential. And when we speak, history listens. She smiled. She was speaking now. Thursday morning arrived crisp and clear. The boardroom was tense with anticipation. Executives murmured, mugs steamed, tablets glowed. But at 9:01 a.m., Maya entered, poised and confident. She carried a laptop and a stack of printed frameworks. At Ethan's nod, she stepped forward. Thank you for having me, she began. Today, I'm presenting a comprehensive framework for global contract integrity addressing translation risks and cultural oversight. No clicker, no bravado, just words that carried authority. She walked through the 7-tier process: initial multilingual screening, cultural context review, legal alignment, stakeholder briefing, risk escalation, partner education, and quarterly audits. She explained how a misinterpreted idiom nearly cost billions, and how layered human expertise catches what machines miss. Eyes widened across the table. The youngest executive whispered to another, It's like she built a whole new division, overnight. By the time she reached the partner communication strategy, the room leaned in. She concluded with a slide that read, Prevention is the currency of trust. Silence followed. Then Diane said, Brilliant. Ethan said, Necessary. Then he looked at the board. Shall we adopt this today? Every hand rose. Afterward, as Maya gathered her things, Ethan approached. They asked for your recommended title. He offered a firm handshake. Would you take Executive Director of Global Integrity? Maya paused. Then she smiled gently. Yes, but only if we ensure access is not symbolic. I need full integration. No back office. He nodded. You'll have it. That afternoon, Maya walked through the estate halls. People greeted her by name. Olivia waved from a linen cart. Trevor stopped and said, Congratulations. She nodded and continued on, feeling the shift beneath her feet. At home that evening, she sat at her desk and drafted an email to Clara Levine. First meeting next week. Let's build Verity. She printed a fresh copy of the board-approved framework and placed it gently atop her manuscript. Chapter 8. From Silence to Structure. Her phone buzzed again, another message from Luis. Want to co-author a workshop? Maya paused, then typed, Let's do it. She pushed back her chair, switched off the desk lamp, and gazed out her window at the city lights. The storm had come. Now she was shaping it. And in the echo of her own power, she found something she'd missed for years. Home. A week had passed since Maya was formally named Executive Director of Global Integrity. The title came with respect, resources, and reach, but it also brought something else: resistance. Not loud, not direct. It came in glances, in missed calendar invites, in CCs omitted from crucial emails. The kind of subtle pushback women like her had felt their entire lives. Maya noticed immediately. She saw it in the way procurement ignored her request for regional dialect clarification on a Baltic contract, in the way a junior partner bypassed her recommendations during a client call, in the shift of posture during meetings. When her insights were acknowledged but not credited, she wasn't surprised, but she was disappointed. Monday morning, she arrived early at Caldwell's Midtown satellite officer, new official headquarters, and began reviewing a new vendor agreement with a South African firm. The language looked polished, clean, too clean. Something about the clause on digital rights storage felt rehearsed. She flagged it, dug deeper. An hour later, she discovered the translation had scrubbed a key distinction. In the original Afrikaans legal text, data sharing could imply open third-party handoff. In the English version, it was quietly rendered as internal replication. That change, subtle as it was, jeopardized the firm's GDPR compliance if implemented in Europe. She documented the risk, corrected the phrasing, and attached the clause history with 3 alternative renderings. Then she sent it to the legal team. Minutes later, a reply came not from the general counsel, but from Tom Hensley, the senior legal officer. The subject line read, "Appreciate your insight, but we've already signed off." Maya read it twice. Then she picked up her phone and called Diane. "Do you have a minute?" Maya asked, her voice calm. "For you? Always," Diane replied. In Diane's office, Maya laid the contract on the desk and explained what had been overlooked. Diane reviewed it silently. Then she exhaled. "They're trying to move around you. I noticed." "This is retaliation," Diane said. "You're outmaneuvering people who've had unchecked authority for decades. They won't let that go easy." Maya nodded. "Then we escalate. This isn't about ego. It's about exposure." That afternoon, Ethan called an emergency compliance session. The heads of legal, procurement, and risk management were summoned. Maya sat at the end of the table silent, composed, and ready. Ethan opened bluntly. "We've had another miss." Maya flagged it. It was almost signed. Tom Hensley shifted. "With respect, Maya is new to the decision chain. It's unrealistic to slow down approvals for retranslation every time." Maya leaned in. "It's unrealistic to expect we survive without it. If that clause was enforced in Europe, we'd be sanctioned, possibly sued. You'd be testifying before the SEC." Tom's jaw clenched. "We can't vet every language like this." "Then build a team that can," Maya said. "You have the budget. Use it." Ethan spoke before Tom could reply. "Maya's right. We've pushed risk downstream for too long." The room was quiet. Then Diane said, "It's time to restructure workflows. Every translation passes through Maya's desk. Period." Tom looked around, realized he was alone, and nodded stiffly. Later, as the meeting broke, Diane turned to Maya. "You handled that like a conductor." "I've spent years listening to rooms like that," Maya said. "Now I finally get to answer them." That night, back at her apartment, Maya sat by the window and opened her laptop. The chapter she'd been too distracted to write began to form. Chapter 9, Resistance in the Quiet Corners. She wrote about the language of exclusion, the syntax of dismissal, how systems don't always fight you with fists. Sometimes, they drown you in silence. She paused, then typed, "But silence is a language too. And when we learn to read it, we disarm it." A knock came at her door. She opened it to find Olivia, holding a small box and a wide smile. "I never got to congratulate you," Olivia said. Maya welcomed her in. They sat at the table as Olivia opened the box of vintage Mont Blanc pen. "It was my father's," Olivia explained. "He was the first black notary in our county. Said you should always write with something that reminds you of who you are." Maya touched the pen gently. "Thank you," she whispered. Later, she used it to write the final sentence of the chapter. "Power doesn't just come from speaking. It comes from being heard of when they try not to listen." And in that small act, writing her own truth with a pen passed down from another fighter, Maya felt a deeper clarity take root. This wasn't just a job anymore. It was a movement. The wind blew sharp that morning, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of a season turning. Autumn was pushing out the last of summer in Atlanta, and for Maya, it brought with it a sense of clarity like the way cold air wakes the senses. Her days now were filled with momentum, each hour defined by strategy meetings, cross-border policy reviews, and slow but steady cultural shifts inside Caldwell Technologies. But just beneath the surface of her progress, a different tension was building. The moment arrived mid-morning, during a stakeholder briefing with the European compliance team. Maya was mid-presentation when she saw Ethan step into the back of the room, holding a manila envelope. He waited until she wrapped up, then signaled for her to follow him out into the hallway. She excused herself, smoothed her blouse, and stepped out. Ethan didn't waste time. "We need to talk somewhere private." Her pulse quickened. They made their way into a glass-walled side office. He closed the door behind them. "I received this last night," he said, placing the envelope on the table. "What is it?" "A formal complaint, filed by Tom Hensley." Maya's brows rose slightly. She said nothing, waiting. "He's accusing you of overreach, claiming that your input on the South African contract went beyond your scope and delayed business. He's also suggested you're redefining protocols without proper authority." Maya crossed her arms. "He's not wrong. I am redefining protocols because the old ones were broken." "I know," Ethan said, lowering his voice. "And I support you, but he's playing political chess now. If this gets to the full board before we contain it, it could slow everything." "Then call his bluff." Ethan shook his head. "It's not that simple." "It is," Maya said evenly. "He's testing how far I can be pushed. If we bend now, every change we've made gets second-guessed." He studied her face. "You want to go public?" "I want transparency. Bring the conversation into the open. Let them see what we're fixing." "You're sure?" "Yes," she said. "Let the truth stand where it needs to. And if they side with him, then at least I'll know what I'm up against." Ethan nodded slowly. "Then prepare your case." That afternoon, Diane joined her. "I've seen the complaint. It's thin, but enough to stir trouble if it lands in the wrong hands. Then let's make sure it lands in the right ones." They worked late into the night, gathering documentation, outlining timelines, listing every misstep avoided thanks to Maya's framework. They included internal emails, project reviews, and commendations from global partners who had praised the clarity of Caldwell's new compliance system. Before leaving, Diane said, "Whatever happens next, I'm standing with you." The next morning, Maya requested a special session with the board. Ethan approved it immediately. By 3 p.m., she stood once again before the long table in the boardroom. This time, there were no introductory pleasantries, just silence. She placed a stack of documents in front of each board member. "This is my response to Mr. Hensley's complaint," she began. "You'll find a timeline of decisions made, results achieved, and risks mitigated." Tom sat to her left, arms folded. He didn't interrupt. "I was brought in to address blind spots," Maya continued. "To safeguard this company from threats it didn't even recognize. I've done that. Every time I raised a red flag, it wasn't to delay, it was to protect. I'm not here to play power games. I'm here to build a structure that will last." She paused, scanning the room. "This is about more than one contract. It's about culture. It's about whether this company truly wants integrity or only the illusion of it." Diane spoke next. "The evidence is clear. Maya's work has protected this company from catastrophic exposure. If her methods feel new, it's because we've spent too long accepting broken ones." Ethan followed. "I brought Maya in because I trusted her ability to see what we couldn't. That hasn't changed." The board reviewed the documents. Murmurs of approval rippled through. Finally, the chairman, a gray-haired man named Lowell Pierce, cleared his throat. "Miss Carter, your performance has not only met expectations, it has defined them anew. We will reject Mr. Hensley's complaint, effective immediately. Your role is to be elevated to Senior Executive Officer for Global Integrity, with full board access." There was a pause. Even Maya felt the weight of it. Lowell continued. "Furthermore, we'll be initiating an internal review of our current leadership dynamics. Change is overdue." Tom stood abruptly. "This is absurd." "Sit down, Tom," Lowell said. Maya remained still. No smile, just breath. The meeting ended. Outside, Diane grinned. "You won." Maya shook her head. The work just started." That night, she returned home to find a package waiting on her doorstep. It was from Clara Levine. Inside was a leather-bound journal and a handwritten note. "Maya, your voice is building more than policy. It's building legacy. Keep writing. We're reading." Maya held the journal close, then opened her laptop. Chapter 10. When the Walls Echo Back. She wrote about resistance, about standing your ground in rooms built to ignore you, about how truth, when consistent, creates echoes that grow louder over time until even stone hears it. And this time, she didn't write in a whisper. She wrote with thunder. The days after the board meeting moved with unusual clarity. Maya no longer had to scan rooms for hesitation in her presence. There were still skeptics, but their voices no longer held weight. Her title had changed, but more importantly, her authority was now structurally affirmed. With that came a new challenge: sustainability. It wasn't enough to win the moment. She had to build something that could last when she was no longer in the room. Her first order of business as Senior Executive Officer for Global Integrity was establishing the Verity Program, an internal task force responsible for cross-cultural contract audits, multilingual risk assessments, and international partnership ethics. She staffed it with experts, some former academics like herself, others from marginalized communities with hidden credentials. She found them in corners most companies overlooked: immigrants with advanced degrees who now drove ride shares, bilingual veterans working warehouse shifts, undocumented scholars tutoring under aliases. Each new hire came with a story, and each story added strength to the system. Verity's first official task was auditing all current contracts with any non-English component. The findings were sobering. Over 60% contained language that was either vague, contradictory, or prone to exploitation in arbitration. For years, Caldwell Technologies had operated on the assumption that English is enough. That assumption had left them legally vulnerable in markets across Asia, Africa, and South America. Maya compiled the report and presented it to the board. She didn't mince words. We've been running a company designed for a monolingual world. But the world is multilingual, multidimensional, and legally complex. Ignorance is no longer an excuse. Her words didn't spark outrage. They sparked action. That week, a major contract with a Vietnamese supplier was paused for renegotiation. Another with a Dubai-based AI firm was sent back for full linguistic review. Each delay cost time, but saved credibility. And then came the whistleblower. It was late Friday when Maya received an anonymous email. The subject line read, "Translation buried internal cover-up." The body was short. They knew the errors. Legal removed the Portuguese annex before you ever saw it. Proof attached. There was a document link. Maya hesitated only for a second before clicking. What she saw froze her. It was an earlier version of the Lisbon contract, the one she'd exposed weeks ago. But this draft included the full annex in Portuguese, the one that had been missing from the file she was given. Her notes had referenced it from another source, but the legal department had never provided it directly. This document was time-stamped 2 days before her review. Someone had buried it. Deliberately, she took a deep breath, printed the file, and locked it in her safe. Then she made 3 backup copies sewn on an encrypted drive, 2 in cloud storage. Saturday morning, she called Diane. They met at a Kit Cafe near Piedmont Park. Maya handed her the file. Diane read it once, then looked up. "This means..." "Yes," Maya said. "Tom Hensley didn't just resist oversight. He obstructed it." Diane leaned back. "He could lose his license for this. If we report it to the bar." "We should," Maya said. "But strategically, we need to build the chain, get signatures, metadata, email trails. If we present it without a full case, it becomes a 'he said,' 'she said.'" Diane nodded. "I'll start pulling our IT records." Sunday was spent in silence. Maya moved like a storm had passed, but the air still held static. She cooked stew, wrote in her journal, and stared at the cover of her manuscript. 10 chapters completed. 1 to go. Monday morning, Ethan called a closed executive session. Maya presented the annex discovery to a select group: Ethan, Diane, the compliance officer, and Caldwell's general counsel. "Tom deliberately removed the annex," she said. "That decision undermined our risk evaluation and nearly led to fraudulently signed terms. The metadata proves the deletion." Ethan rubbed his temple. "What's your recommendation?" "Terminate his contract, file a report with the state bar, and issue a public internal statement. Caldwell Technologies will not tolerate internal suppression of risk intelligence." It was a bold move, but necessary. By the end of the meeting, Ethan agreed. Tom Hensley was gone by Wednesday. His exit triggered ripples across the firm, some of fear, others of admiration. The old guard knew now. Maya Carter wasn't a moment. She was a movement. That evening, she returned to her apartment and sat at her desk. She opened her manuscript file. Chapter 11, When Shadows Speak. She wrote, "The most dangerous threat to truth is not ignorance, it is fear. Fear of what truth will cost. Fear of who truth will expose. But truth doesn't disappear when buried. It waits, quietly, until someone dares to dig it up." She paused, then continued, "I was never meant to see that contract, but I did, because I prepared myself for the moment they hoped would pass unnoticed. And now, I am not just watching history. I am writing it." Her fingers trembled slightly, not from fear but from the energy of clarity. Every page, every confrontation, every quiet victory had led here, and the next chapter would be the one that changed everything. The air in the executive atrium was different that morning. Not just because the old legal director's nameplate had been quietly removed, or because a sense of reckoning had settled like dust after a storm. It was something else, a kind of stillness before new things begin. And in that stillness, Maya Carter stood at the center. 3 months had passed since she first stepped beyond the shadows of invisibility at Caldwell Technologies. And now, as she prepared to deliver the keynote at the company's first Global Integrity Forum, she no longer felt like an outsider proving her right to be heard. She was the room, and the room was listening. The conference hall was modest but elegantly arranged, packed with senior leaders, department heads, and invited international partners. For the first time, the event included simultaneous translation in 6 languages, something Maya had personally insisted on. At the back, screens projected her presentation in real time, subtitles flickering like rhythm to her voice. She approached the podium, adjusted the microphone, and looked across the audience. "When I first came to this company," she began, "my job was to clean rooms, not sit in them, not speak in them, certainly not lead them." Laughter rippled gently through the room, not mocking, but warm, familiar. She continued, "But rooms have memories. They remember who was silenced, who was overlooked, and when those voices return, rooms change." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "I'm not here today as a symbol. I'm here as a blueprint. What we've built together through the Verity program is not just a compliance tool, it's a value system. It's a declaration that clarity, integrity, and respect aren't optional. They're non-negotiable." Behind her, a slide appeared, showing the new organizational chart. At the top next to Ethan and Diana was Maya's title, bold and unmissable, Senior Executive Officer, Global Integrity and Equity. She went on to share milestones: 80, 4 contracts corrected, 12 new cultural auditors hired, 3 internal legal reviews pending amendment. She introduced new initiatives: language mentorships, ethics workshops, international student internships. "We are no longer just translating words," she said. "We are translating power, from the few to the many." When the applause came, it wasn't just polite, it was affirming, sustained. Maya nodded in gratitude and left the stage, heart steady, eyes clear. Later, in the green room, Luis met her with a wide grin. "You didn't just change the company," he said. "You changed the vocabulary." Maya smiled. "Took long enough." Luis handed her a small envelope. "Thought you'd want to see this." Inside was a letter, official stationery, Department of Education. It read, "We are pleased to inform you that Verity Language and Risk Advisory has been selected as a model program for national implementation in federal education partnerships. We'd like to invite you to serve on the founding board." She blinked. For a moment, the weight of it landed full. Years of invisibility, of labor, of grief, now converted, word by word, into influence. Later that evening, she returned to her apartment and sat once more at her desk. She opened her manuscript for the final time. Chapter 12, The New Room. She wrote, "The most powerful rooms are not those filled with titles. They're the ones that remember who was once left outside, and invite them in not as guests, but as architects." Maya leaned back, breathing in the silence. It was the good kind of silence, now the kind earned. Then she reached for the journal Clara gave her, turned to the final page, and wrote 5 words. Let the next one speak. And she knew they would, because now, the door was open. The story of Maya Carter teaches us that true power lies not in titles or status, but in the courage to speak truth in rooms built to silence you. It reminds us that justice often begins quietly with someone daring to challenge what's been accepted for too long. Maya's journey from overlooked maid to a voice of global integrity proves that resilience, knowledge, and integrity can reshape systems. Most importantly, it shows that when the door finally opens, the greatest legacy is making sure it stays open for others.